I was raised as the youngest of 3 girls, and my name is Pamela. Danielle and Diana, my twin sisters, are 4 years my senior. Although we lived in a modest 2-story home in a peaceful neighborhood, there was rarely any warmth or love in our house. I always felt like an afterthought in my household as a child. Mom and Dad showered Diana and Danielle with attention, attending all of their school functions and complimenting their accomplishments. My achievements, however, were little acknowledged. The twins inherited their father's physical prowess and their mother's musical skill. Pamela, I was simply ordinary. My folks weren't mean. They took care of my food, clothing, and assignments. However, this remoteness and coldness persisted. Following their example, the twins treated me more like a bothersome roommate than their sister. I thus anticipated the typical when my 18th birthday arrived: a cake from the shop, a gift card, and everyone going about their daily lives by 7 p.m. I definitely didn't anticipate finding the dining room decked out with balloons and streamers when I came downstairs that morning. Surprise! Mom remarked, grinning more broadly than I had seen in a long time. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I wondered whether I had entered another reality as I stood still. I questioned, what's all this? With his arm around my shoulder, Dad said, it's your 18th birthday. Did you think we'd let it pass without a proper celebration? With a lovely package in hand, the twins came out of the kitchen. Open it, urged Diana. A gorgeous emerald green garment that appeared absurdly costly was inside. Try it on, said Danielle. Tonight, we're hosting a party. A real celebration, complete with attendees. Mom may have thought I was totally confused because she chuckled and gave me a cheek kiss. Pamela, don't seem so surprised. You only get to be 18 once. Preparations took up the remainder of the day. Mom prepared my favorite delicacies in the kitchen for hours on end. Dad did a thorough cleaning of the entire house. The twins even pitched in by putting up a playlist and moving furniture to make room for dancing. By nightfall, I was standing in my new outfit, seeing our living room crowded with friends, family, and a few of my classmates. There were wrapped gifts on a table in the corner. Everyone had champagne glasses ready for toasts, and the twins had persuaded Dad to buy booze. I said to myself in a whisper, I can't believe this. When Dad tapped his glass at 8 p.m., the room went quiet. He said, "Today we celebrate our youngest daughter," in a strangely sentimental tone. Pamela, one of the greatest blessings of life has been witnessing you develop into the young lady you are today. You will succeed much in life because of your generosity, tenacity, and quiet strength. I'm really proud, as is your mother. Mom came forward beside me. Happy 18th birthday, Pamela, you are beautiful. Sweetheart, you have our undying affection. The twins even gave remarks. To my little sister, Diana said, lifting her glass, I apologize for taking your clothes so many times without asking. Danielle grinned as she said, and sorry we teased you about your first crush, you're actually pretty cool for a little sister. Everyone clinked drinks and laughed. My eyes began to brim up with tears. Here I was, the center of attention, surrounded by warmth and affection, after years of feeling invisible. A huge cake with 18 candles was later displayed by Dad. It had my name inscribed in a beautiful font and was adorned with small sugar flowers. Mom said, "Make a wish, sweetheart," as I was blowing out the candles. I shut my eyes. I wish this feeling could last forever. I then extinguished all 18 candles with a single puff. Everyone applauded. Mom clasped my hand as Dad sliced the cake. The celebration lasted into midnight. I felt like the happiest girl alive as I moved between groups as my pals danced in the living room and the grown-ups conversed in the kitchen. It seemed as if one evening had erased 18 years of emotional neglect. When the last guest left, I helped clean up despite Mom's insistence that I shouldn't have to on my birthday. Today was perfect, I told my parents as we finished putting away the leftover food. I don't know how to thank you. You deserve it, Pamela, Dad said, kissing the top of my head. Now get some rest. It's been a long day. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, still wearing my beautiful new dress. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but think that maybe things were changing. Maybe turning 18 meant a new chapter in my relationship with my family. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, completely unaware that this birthday celebration wasn't the beginning of something wonderful. I woke up late the next morning, still basking in the afterglow of my perfect birthday. The house was unusually quiet, but I figured everyone was sleeping in after the party. I stretched, grabbed my phone to check messages from friends about the party, and headed to the bathroom. As I passed the twins' room, I noticed the door was open. Their beds were made, which was weird. Diana and Danielle never made their beds unless Mom nagged them for hours. "Hello?" I called out, suddenly uneasy. "Mom, Dad?" Silence. I hurried downstairs, an unpleasant feeling growing in my stomach. The kitchen was spotless. No coffee brewing, no breakfast dishes, no sign of my family. I moved through the house, room by room, calling out, each step making my heart beat faster. "Mom? Dad? Diana? Danielle?" This isn't funny. When I checked my parents' bedroom, everything clicked into place. The closet doors were open, and at least half their clothes were gone. Their dresser drawers were partially empty. On Mom's vanity, the expensive perfumes and jewelry she wore daily had disappeared. They were gone. I ran back to the twins' room and yanked open their closet. Same thing, half empty. Their favorite shoes, the designer bags they'd saved for months to buy, their laptops, all gone. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." Back in the kitchen, I found a folded piece of paper on the table that I'd missed in my initial panic. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately. "Pamela, you're 18 now, officially an adult. It's time for you to make your own way in the world, just as we need to make ours. Your father and I are tired. Raising 3 girls hasn't been easy. And frankly, we've done our part. Last night's party was our parting gift to you. Don't bother looking for us. We've already sold the house. The new owners will be moving in 2 weeks from today. So, you have until then to find other arrangements. Your sisters have graduated college and have good jobs. They'll be helping us, not you. We simply don't have extra money for your college education, and honestly, we've always thought you were the least promising of our children. Your father and I have decided to start fresh. We've moved abroad with the twins, so feel free to tell anyone about what we've done. We're beyond caring about local gossip at this point. Take care of yourself, Mom." I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, the letter crumpled in my fist. The beautiful birthday dress I'd hung carefully in my closet last night. The heartfelt speeches, the hugs, the cake. It was all a sick farewell performance. Damn! I screamed into the empty house. My voice echoed back at me. I crumpled to the floor and sobbed until my throat was raw. Then I started calling them all, Mom, Dad, my sisters. An emotionless, automatic voice replied that such phone numbers no longer existed. Hours later, I dragged myself to my room and stared blankly at the ceiling. I needed to think, to make a plan. Who could help me? Mom and Dad had systematically cut ties with most of our relatives years ago. They're judgmental and toxic, Mom would say, whenever I asked about my grandparents or aunts and uncles. I had friends, sure, but none close enough to move in with. Mom and Dad had always discouraged sleepovers or deep friendships. Now that I thought about it, they'd kept our social circle small and controlled. I was truly alone, with 2 weeks to figure out my entire life. Then I remembered Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother. Years ago, they'd had a massive fight over my grandparents' inheritance. Dad had somehow manipulated the situation and taken everything, leaving Uncle Robert with nothing. My parents had forbidden any contact with him, but when I was 15, I'd found him on social media, and we'd started a secret correspondence. It wasn't much, birthday wishes, holiday greetings, occasional life updates. But it was something, a tiny connection to family. It's beautiful, I said. Try not to cry again, I thought. I'd done enough of that. You can stay here as long as you need to, honey, Aunt Sharon said, her hand warm on my shoulder. We have plenty of room, and we'd love the company. That first night, we sat around their kitchen table eating homemade lasagna. They didn't cry about my parents, and I was grateful. Instead, they told me about their town, about Maya's restaurant in Florence, about their jobs. Uncle Robert was an accountant, and Sharon a high school art teacher. I need to find work, I said during a lull in the conversation. I don't want to be a burden. Your family, Pamela, not a burden, Uncle Robert said firmly. But I understand wanting to keep busy. There's a Super Save about 2 miles from here that's always hiring. The next day, I walked to Super Save and filled out an application. To my surprise, they called me that same afternoon for an interview. By the end of the week, I had a job as a warehouse stocker. The work was hard, lots of heavy lifting and long hours on my feet, but I threw myself into it. My supervisor, Dave, quickly noticed my work ethic. You're the first person who's actually organized the backstock by expiration date without me having to ask 3 times, he said one day, about 2 months after I'd started. Most kids your age are on their phones half the shift. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I settled into a routine, work, help around the house, repeat. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sharon refused to take rent money, so I saved almost everything I earned. On weekends, I helped Aunt Sharon with her garden or Uncle Robert with household repairs. They treated me like a daughter, not a charity case, and the wound of my parents' abandonment slowly began to scab over. 1 year after my parents left, Mr. Jenkins, the store director, called me into his office. Pamela, I've been watching your work. You've got potential that's being wasted in the warehouse. I shifted in my seat. Thank you, sir. Have you considered college? He asked bluntly. I looked down at my hands. I can't afford it. What about community college courses? Management certification? Something to get you on a different track. Warehouse work is fine, but you shouldn't do it forever. That evening, I discussed it with Uncle Robert and Aunt Sharon over dinner. He's right, Uncle Robert said. You should get some education, but the cost. We can help, Aunt Sharon interrupted. We've been saving for years for Maya's graduate school, but she got a scholarship. That money's just sitting there. I can't take your money, I protested. Consider it a loan, then, Uncle Robert suggested. Pay us back when you're a millionaire CEO. They laughed, but I could tell they were serious about helping me. The next week, I enrolled in management courses at the local community college. For a year, I worked during the day and studied at night. It was exhausting, but exhilarating to be learning again. After completing the certification program, Mr. Jenkins promoted me to floor supervisor, then to assistant manager. 6 months later, my salary nearly doubled. Emboldened by this success, I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree in business administration through an accelerated online program. It would take me 2 more years of intense work, but I was determined. Those 2 years were a blur of work, study, and occasional sleep, but I did it. I graduated with honors at 23, and within a month, I was promoted again, this time to regional management for the Super Save chain, overseeing operations for 12 stores. I'm so proud of you, Aunt Sharon said at my small graduation celebration. You've overcome so much. Because of you, too, I said, hugging them both. I wouldn't be here without you. Around this time, I met Jason at a regional managers conference. He was 28, worked for a supply chain company that partnered with Super Save, and had the most infectious laugh I'd ever heard. We started dating a month later. Jason came from money. His family owned a successful construction business, but he'd insisted on building his own career. I admired that about him. He didn't judge me for my past either, when I finally shared it. 2 years of dating flew by. On my 26th birthday, Jason proposed during a hike to a waterfall we both loved. I said yes immediately. We planned a small wedding for that fall. Uncle Robert would walk me down the aisle. Aunt Sharon would be my matron of honor. And Maya was flying in from Italy with her husband and their new baby. I can't believe we've never met in person, Maya said when she video called to confirm her travel dates. Mom and Dad have told me so much about you. I laughed. All good things, I hope. The best, she assured me. They say you're the daughter they always wanted. A month before the wedding, Maya called again, her voice oddly tense. Pamela, something weird happened yesterday. I was at a local cafe with some friends, and they introduced me to a couple who moved here from America. Okay. I wasn't sure where this was going. The man. He looked exactly like my dad. Like eerily similar. When they said his last name, I nearly fell off my chair. It's Thompson. I think they're your parents, Pam. They're living here in Florence. The room started spinning. Are you sure? Almost positive. I didn't let on that I might know them, but I did some digging. They took out a huge loan a few years ago to start an import business here. It's failing spectacularly. The bank is foreclosing on their house next month. I gripped the phone tighter, a strange mixture of emotions washing over me, shock, anger, and then slowly, something like satisfaction. They're losing everything? I asked. Pretty much, Maya confirmed. What do you want to do? I took a deep breath, an idea forming. I need to talk to Jason. Jason listened as I explained Maya's discovery, his expression growing increasingly incredulous. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your parents, who abandoned you on your 18th birthday and told you they never wanted to see you again, are now losing their house in Italy. I nodded, a plan already forming. Jason, you mentioned wanting to buy property in Europe. His eyes widened as he caught on. You want to buy their house? The one they're being foreclosed on. Exactly. A strange calm had settled over me. Maya can help arrange it. She's married to Giovanni Rossi now. Different last name than Dad. They won't connect us. Over the next few weeks, as we finalized wedding preparations, Maya worked with local realtors. The bank was eager to sell, and with Jason's resources, we made a compelling offer. 3 days before our wedding, we got the news. The house was ours. Our wedding was perfect, simple, intimate, surrounded by people who truly loved me. As Jason and I exchanged vows, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led me here, despite its painful beginnings. 2 weeks after the honeymoon, Jason and I flew to Italy. I was 4 months pregnant by then, just starting to show. Maya met us at the airport, embracing me like the cousin she'd become in spirit, if not in blood. They don't know you're coming, she warned as we drove to the house. My house now. I told them the new owners wanted to meet them to discuss the move-out timeline. Perfect, I said, one hand resting on my slightly swollen belly. The house was a lovely Tuscan-style villa with terracotta roof tiles and a garden full of olive trees. Under different circumstances, I might have admired its beauty. Today, I was focused on only one thing. Maya knocked on the door. A woman answered. My mother. 8 years had aged her considerably. Her once dark hair was streaked with gray, and deep lines framed her mouth. Maya, thank you for coming, and these must be the new. She froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized me. Pamela. Hello, Mother, I said coolly. Surprise. She stumbled backward. Richard, come quickly. My father appeared behind her, also looking older and worn. He stared at me in disbelief. What is this? What are you doing here? Maya, would you do the honors? I asked, ignoring him. Maya stepped forward. All business, she said, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'd like to formally introduce you to the new owners of this property, Pamela and Jason Miller. My mother's face crumpled. You bought our house. Your house. I laughed. No, Mom. It's my house now. My father grabbed my mother's arm as she swayed. Pamela, please. You can't do this to us. We're your parents. Parents, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Funny. I remember you saying I was an extra ballast and hopeless, that you were tired of raising me, that you wanted to start life with a clean slate, without me in it. We were wrong, my mother sobbed, reaching for me. We missed you so much, baby. We regretted it almost immediately. But not enough to come find me, I observed. Not enough to apologize. Where are Diana and Danielle? I asked suddenly. Shouldn't your precious twins be helping you through this difficult time? My father's face darkened. We don't speak to them anymore. We had a falling out. Diana moved back to the States and Danielle is somewhere in Europe. We're not sure where. How convenient for you to need me now that they're gone, I said. My mother fell to her knees, grabbing the hem of my dress. Please, Pamela, we can make it up to you. We'll look after this house for you. Clean it, maintain it. We'll help raise your baby. I looked down at her, at the pathetic spectacle she'd become, and felt nothing but pity mixed with disgust. Help raise my child? I laughed. I've studied your parenting methods extensively, and I think I'll pass. I turned to Maya. The contract gives them how many days to vacate? 7 to 30 days, at the new owner's discretion, she replied promptly. I looked back at my parents. You have exactly 7 days, not 1 day more. But where will we go? My father demanded, his old arrogance briefly resurfacing. Not my problem, I replied. Figure it out. 1 week later, Jason and I set up deck chairs on the front lawn with a cooler of drinks between us. We watched as my parents loaded their meager belongings into a small rental truck, casting venomous glances our way. You'll regret this, my father muttered as he passed us. I doubt it, I replied, sipping my virgin mojito. Enjoy your fresh start. When they were gone, Jason squeezed my hand. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully. Calm, lighter, like I finally put down a heavy weight I've been carrying for years. We walked through our new house, my house, together. It would need some renovations before the baby came. But it had good bones. As I stood in what would become the nursery, looking out over the Tuscan landscape, I felt peace for the first time since that birthday night 8 years ago. Later that evening, I video called Uncle Robert and Aunt Sharon to show them the house. Aunt Sharon remarked, "It's beautiful, sweetheart, you deserve it." Adding, "We're so proud of you," Uncle Robert said. Not for the revenge, though, he said. I can't say I blame you, but for everything you've built for yourself despite them. With tears stinging my eyes, I grinned. Without you, I also couldn't have succeeded. My true family is you. Always, they all said together. Regarding my biological relatives, my mother and father vanished from Florence the day they left. They were never seen or heard from again. I still don't know my sisters. I'm mildly curious about what happened to them, although I do wonder sometimes. Scholarly. The family I created is my real family. Aunt Sharon and Uncle Robert provided me with a home when I didn't have one. Every summer, Maya and her spouse come to Florence to see us. Jason, who unconditionally loves me. Our kids, who will never understand what it's like to be loved or abandoned. And me, a woman who discovered that family isn't always blood, rather than that surprised, sad 18-year-old. That justice may occasionally come at the ideal moment, and that power frequently arises from unexpected sources. I give our lakefront home and $150,000 to Catherine, my cherished granddaughter. My grandparents' gift to me both shattered the last thread of the false notion of a family and launched a new chapter in my life. Catherine Harper is my name. I was compared to my older sister all the time from a young age. She is the pride of our parents, did well in school, and is a talented athlete. However, I was awkward and constantly appeared to be in her shadow. My sister's decision was usually given precedence at home, and my viewpoints were frequently disregarded. Everything centered on her, whether it was our meals, our destinations, or even the subjects of our conversations. I eventually came to the conclusion that my presence or absence is irrelevant. My grandparents' home was my lone refuge in such a mundane existence. They always paid close attention to what I had to say. They embraced every word as though it were a priceless gem, whether it was about a little incident at school or a tale about my difficulties in gym class. My grandfather would frame my awkward drawings and proudly display them on the wall as my grandma brewed tea with a kind grin, declaring, "It's wonderful." To me, their house was a completely different universe. Every season saw flowers bloom in the little garden, and soft sunshine streamed into the living room. I was never likened to anybody there. I was never made to feel invisible or pushed into a position. I felt recognized and appreciated for who I was, and it was the only place where I could really breathe. To me, my grandparents' home felt like another planet. Warm sunlight poured into the living room from the tiny yard, where flowers flourished with every season. I was never forced into a role or compared to anybody there. It was a place where time passed quietly and gently, and I could just be myself. I used to run down the street toward my grandparents' house on days when anything bad happened at school. The aroma of my grandmother's freshly made cookies would welcome me as soon as I opened the front door. When my grandfather saw me, he would put down his newspaper and make an exaggerated motion with his arms stretched wide. "Welcome," was his greeting. And the significance of those words for me is beyond words. The older I became, the less often I went to their place. However, I always carried the warmth I discovered there in my heart. The atmosphere in which I was frequently contrasted with my sister remained mostly unchanged. However, I was silently supported by the sense that my grandparents provided me, that it's acceptable to be who I am. As soon as I told my parents I wanted to go to college, they were against it. They responded, "We need money for Meline's wedding," and promptly denied my plea to attend university. My parents appeared to be giving her wedding their whole attention. Their whole attention was drawn to the lavish celebration as the preparations advanced. The clothing was custom-made, and the event took place at a prestigious hotel with opulent cuisine and suites. The entire ceremony was reminiscent of a movie, and it took precedence over my preparations for college. I chose to use student loans to continue my school because I couldn't give up. I didn't think it was unjust that my parents didn't help me with my education and instead used the majority of the money they had saved for my sister's wedding. I recognized that attending the wedding reception was a significant memory for my sister. My grandparents were also invited. I could feel that they had sensed the subtle tension in the air, and they had always taken a keen interest in me. My grandma came over to the table I was seated at that day and talked to me in a low voice. Her voice was warm and concerned as she said, "How is university going, Catherine?" Despite my slight surprise, I responded to her. "I'm now studying really hard. In the future, I hope to work for a reputable marketing firm." Although my grandma grinned, there was a hint of a more nuanced look in her eyes. "That's wonderful. Seeing you work so hard makes me really happy." I felt my heart swell with gratitude for her kindness. In that moment, a small part of my frustration with my parents seemed to ease. My grandfather, who had been listening to our conversation, added, "If you ever find yourself in a tough spot, don't hesitate to ask. We'll always be here to support you. You just focus on being happy," he said warmly. "We'll help you to achieve whatever you want to accomplish." I still clearly remember how reassuring those words were. The contrast between the opulence of the wedding and my grandparents' warm words left me feeling conflicted. But deep down, I made a firm decision. Even though my sister had been favored in many ways, I would carve my own path. No matter how difficult it might be or how little the understanding I might receive from those around me, I had resolved to trust in my own future and keep pushing forward. My grandparents' words became my greatest source of strength. No matter what path I chose, no matter how long it took, I was determined to keep moving forward to make my dreams come true. Everything changed in the summer just before my third year of college. "Catherine, Grandma's voice sounded thin and fragile through the phone. "Franklin, your grandpa had a massive heart attack in his study. The doctors couldn't save him." Her words dissolved into barely controlled sobs. I have no memory of the frantic drive to the hospital, only the crushing weight of grief as I entered the room to find him already gone. Grandma sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. I gently placed my hand on my grandmother's shoulder and silently leaned against her. Her small frame trembled, and through her warmth, I could feel the depth of her sorrow. For a while, the two of us sat quietly, sharing the silence. To my grandmother, my grandfather had been a precious companion she had walked through life with. Losing him left a gaping hole in her heart. When I looked up at her, I saw the love shaped by all the years they had spent together and the sadness of no longer being able to reach him reflected in her eyes. I squeezed her hand tightly, silently vowing to support her in any way I could, no matter how small. However, a month after my grandfather's death, my grandmother too passed away, as if to follow him to heaven. It was so sudden that I couldn't accept the loss. They were irreplaceable to me, always there to support me. My grandmother's warm words and my grandfather's strong encouragement still echo in my ears. And the thought that I would never hear their voices again was unbearably painful. My heart felt empty, and I didn't know what to do. 1 week after laying Grandma Eleanor to rest beside Grandpa Franklin, we assembled in the office. Mr. Patterson, their longtime attorney, carefully positioned his reading glasses, opened an embossed leather portfolio, and began reciting the legal document in a practiced tone. "To our beloved granddaughter, Catherine," Mr. Patterson announced clearly, "we bequeath our lake house property at 1542 Pinehaven Drive, along with liquid assets totaling $150,000. I could hear Meline's inhaling sharply, saw her perfectly glossed lips part in speechless outrage, while my mother's manicured fingers dug into my father's forearm with such force that her knuckles blanched white against her skin. Mr. Patterson adjusted his tie and continued. Additionally, Franklin Rose included a personal message to his daughter, Vivian. He looked directly at my mother before reading. "Vivian, we are not leaving you and Meline anything. This decision reflects our final wishes. When you claimed to be in a financial emergency and preparing for Meline's wedding, we provided $200,000. We respected your needs at that time. Therefore, we trust that you will respect our decision." At that moment, my mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "There's no way I can accept this." Unable to contain her fury, she slammed her hand on the table. "We're family. It's completely unfair to treat only Catherine specially. Father and mother must have made some kind of mistake. I object. This needs to be reconsidered." Mr. Patterson quietly removed his glasses and let out a sigh. "Ms. Vivian, this is a formal will. The wishes of the deceased must be legally respected." My mother tried to argue further, but I simply sat there in silence. A storm of emotions raged inside me, but I had nothing to say. My grandparents' wishes were more important to me than anything else. When Mr. Patterson finished and gathered his documents, my parents rushed out discontentedly, but they were lying in wait for me in the parking lot. "Sweet Catherine," Mom said in a syrupy voice I had never heard before. I stopped, unable to hide the weariness in my eyes as I looked at her. "This isn't the best place to talk. Could you spare a little time?" She coaxed, with Dad and Meline standing quietly behind her. After a moment's hesitation, I silently nodded. We entered a nearby cafe, and Mom wasted no time getting to the point. "Catherine, the lakeside house you inherited. It's a place full of memories for all of us, isn't it?" She spoke with a gentle smile, but there was a calculating gleam in her eyes. And so, she lifted her cup, took a small sip of coffee, and continued, "If you're willing to sell the house, I can introduce you to a good real estate agent. You could get a great price for it right now, and you'd have cash in hand. It's not a bad deal, don't you think?" I stayed silent. I had no intention of selling, but I held my tongue, curious to see where this was going. Without missing a beat, Dad jumped in. "Catherine, just maintaining a house costs a fortune. Property taxes, repairs, it's a heavy burden, especially for someone young like you, Meline quickly added. You're not planning to live all the way out there, are you? It would be smarter to sell it and use the money for yourself in a more convenient place. Her voice was gentle, but underneath, I caught a hint of urgency. The three of them were trying to persuade me with carefully chosen words, but their true intentions were all too obvious. They were dissatisfied that the inheritance from my grandparents hadn't been passed to them, and now they were trying to convince me to sell the house and turn it into cash. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand, whispering softly, Catherine, we're family, right? Let's help each other out. I quietly withdrew my hand. A cold resolve began to grow in my heart. The house my grandparents had entrusted to me, it was the place where I first felt unconditional love, a precious repository of memories. There were things there that could not be measured by monetary value. I took a slow breath, then opened my mouth calmly. I'm sorry. I don't intend to sell it. Mom's expression froze in an instant. Dad and Meline were staring at me, speechless. I stood up and pushed my chair back. I want to cherish what Grandpa and Grandma left behind, along with that house. With that, I left the cafe. There was a strange warmth spreading in my chest. For the first time, I had been able to say no to my family with my own will, and I felt proud of myself. After that, I successfully graduated from university and got a job at the marketing company I had hoped for. At first, I was a bit confused by the unfamiliar tasks. But with the support of those around me, I gradually gained confidence. In my new workplace, I experienced the joy of seeing my ideas take shape every day, and I spent busy but fulfilling days. With the new job, I also started living on my own. It was a small apartment, but the space I had chosen and arranged myself gave me an irreplaceable sense of peace. After work, playing my favorite music and making coffee became the greatest reward for me. Since that day, I had almost no contact with my parents or sister. At first, there were a few awkward exchanges. But over time, I distanced myself, and before I knew it, months had passed without any communication. Though there were moments of loneliness, more than anything, the feeling that I was now truly walking my own life was what supported me. Living freely, choosing freely without being bound by anyone, that daily life calmed my heart. One day, I suddenly received a phone call from my mother. Catherine, would you join us for dinner this Friday? Something in her tone sounded different. My instincts screamed it was a trap, but my curiosity overrode everything else. Pulling into the driveway of my childhood prison felt like entering a time warp where everything had deteriorated rapidly. The once pristine colonial house now resembled a neglected foreclosure, peeling paint flaked from the sides, gutters hung at awkward angles, and the lawn my father once obsessively maintained had surrendered its space to dandelions and bare patches. Inside, the house felt cramped but surprisingly tidy. Oliver and Adrian, Meline's 4-year-old twins, tore through the living room like miniature hurricanes. My mother embraced me with unexpected enthusiasm. We've prepared your favorite pot roast with those little red potatoes you love. I stiffened in her embrace, the absurdity hitting me like a slap. That's not my favorite, I said before I could stop myself. That's Meline's favorite. I've always preferred grilled salmon. An uncomfortable silence descended, heavy as concrete, until my father cleared his throat dramatically. What is your favorite food? He asked, his expression showing genuine curiosity. We should know these things. To my astonishment, they actually seemed sincerely interested in the answer. During dinner, they peppered me with questions about my Wall Street position, my Manhattan apartment, even my weekend activities. They appeared to genuinely listen when I explained derivatives trading, though I could tell by their glazed expressions that the financial terminology might as well have been Sanskrit. As dessert was being served, my father spoke up. This year, we're expecting a lot of relatives for Thanksgiving, so we'd like to have it in a bigger house. I've been trying to find a spacious place to rent, but I haven't had much luck, he said. I put down my fork and quietly listened to his words. At that moment, what came to mind was the villa I had inherited from my grandparents. Surrounded by nature, spacious and peaceful, it seemed like the perfect place for a large gathering. More than anything, I thought it might be a good opportunity to step into that house again, which held so many memories of my grandparents. Then my mother spoke up a little hesitantly. "Would you be willing to lend us the villa you inherited?" I hesitated for a moment. That villa was a very special place to me. Was it really okay to lend it out so easily? Sensing my hesitation, my sister Meline chimed in with a bright voice. "I'd love to take the kids to the villa," Meline said. "Wouldn't it be wonderful to let them play freely in nature?" Her face lit up with an expectant smile. For a moment, a wave of complex emotions washed over me. That villa was a place filled with special memories of my grandparents and me. I couldn't help but feel hesitant about letting Meline and her children come and go so freely. But then I thought about what my grandparents would have done. Surely, they would have watched over the children running around, smiling warmly. With that thought in my heart, I slowly nodded. "Sure, let's all have a wonderful time together." And so it was decided that we would hold the Thanksgiving party at my villa. On Thanksgiving Day, I headed to the vacation home I had inherited from my grandparents. Feeling a little nervous, I had made sure to arrive a bit early, according to the time my parents had given me for the party. I was excited to see my relatives again after such a long time. But more than anything, I was happy that everyone would gather at my grandparents' cottage. The place was filled with warm memories of the times I had spent with my grandparents as a child. And now, my entire family would be stepping into it together. Just thinking about it made me feel as if my grandparents were joining us for this Thanksgiving celebration. I was sure they would be watching over us somewhere, smiling at the sight of us, laughing and enjoying ourselves. As I drove, that thought made me smile naturally. I could already picture the children running around the yard and everyone gathered around the dining table, and it filled my heart with warmth. Not long ago, I had hesitated to open up the cottage to my family. But now, I felt differently. Sharing the memories of my grandparents with everyone like this seemed like the best way to honor them. That's how I truly felt. However, the moment I opened the front door, something felt off. The house was filled only with the lingering traces of a gathering. Used plates and cups were piled up, and stains covered the tablecloth. The party had clearly ended long ago. The relatives were already gone, and only silence remained in the spacious villa. Confused, I stepped further inside. From the back of the house, I heard my parents laughing. Peeking into the next room, I saw them lounging on the sofa, chatting comfortably. I overheard my mother say with a laugh, "It's such a relief that she owns a big house, let's leave the cleaning to her." My father chuckled in agreement. I stood there in silence, feeling the coldness seeping into my feet. I had offered the house out of a desire to help my family. But now it felt like I was seen as nothing more than a convenient owner. A deep unspoken loneliness slowly spread through my chest. A sense of loneliness surged within me. And at the same time, anger welled up. I finally made a decision. I thought about confronting my parents directly, but I already felt as if I had been ignored, and it seemed pointless. As a place to channel my anger, I decided to call the police. Of course, I knew that just having the police come wouldn't immediately resolve the situation. However, I strongly felt that I had to do something to protect my rights. When the police arrived, an argument began between my parents and me. "Why did you call the police?" Dad approached me, his anger clearly visible. "This is the house I inherited." "You two were trespassing," I replied firmly. "Trespassing? We're family. There's nothing wrong with us using this house. Besides, you said we could use it, too," Mom spoke in a strong tone. "I didn't let you use it to be treated like this. I'm sick of you acting like family only when it's convenient. This place is very important to me," I shouted, tears welling up in my eyes. And then a police officer stepped in between us. "Please calm down. Since this is a family matter, we cannot treat it as a criminal case," the police officer said. At those words, I bit my lip. I felt as if no one was truly acknowledging my anger or sadness. Even after the police left, my parents showed no signs of remorse. "You're making such a fuss over nothing," my mother said, sounding exasperated. I made up my mind. "Fine, then I'll sue you. We'll settle this properly in court," I declared. My father and mother looked surprised, but I didn't back down. I couldn't bear to have something so important to me trampled on any longer. And so, the conflict between my parents and me escalated into a civil lawsuit. I decided to consult with Mr. Patterson, the lawyer who had been assisting my grandparents for many years. He was an experienced attorney who had managed my grandparents' assets. And to me, he was someone I could truly trust. Listening calmly and carefully, he quickly grasped the situation and said firmly, "Even though they are your parents, your ownership rights must be protected." Those words gave me a profound sense of relief. Preparing for the lawsuit was anything but easy. Gathering all the necessary documents, records of interactions with my parents, the deed to the villa, and the history of its usage was an overwhelming task. However, I did not back down. This was a battle to protect my own dignity and the place that meant so much to me. On the day of the trial, I testified in court with confidence, without being swayed by emotions. I conveyed the facts calmly but firmly. My parents, though visibly shaken, continued to insist on their own righteousness until the very end. A few weeks later, the verdict was delivered. The court recognized the plaintiff's claims and ordered the defendants to cease use of the property and pay damages. At that moment, I quietly closed my eyes and took a deep breath. At last, my voice had been acknowledged under the law. After the verdict was announced, my parents and sister began sending frequent messages and phone calls apologizing. At first, they were short messages of apology, but gradually they turned into pleas asking, "Please just meet with us once." I didn't respond to any of them. Even so, they didn't give up. One day, after finishing work and returning to my apartment, I found my mother standing in front of the door. She looked exhausted, holding a small paper bag in her hand. "Welcome home," she said awkwardly. I kept my hand on the doorknob and stared at her in silence. "Please just listen to me for a moment," she pleaded. I sighed and reluctantly decided to stay by the door and hear her out. "We truly regret what we've done, hurting you, the whole situation with the villa. Please forgive us. We're family. Aren't we?" I shook my head quietly. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. However, I didn't change my expression. "Your father's company went bankrupt. He's drowning in debt right now. Please, can you help us?" she said in a soft voice. I took a deep breath, then said clearly, "I can't. I don't consider you my family anymore." My mother stared at me for a moment in shock, then slowly lowered her head and quietly left. I closed the door and immediately contacted Mr. Patterson. "So, she came directly, huh?" he said calmly. "In that case, we should apply for a restraining order. It's necessary to protect both your life and peace of mind." I nodded quietly. "Please." Thus, I made the decision to once again seek the power of the law to protect my world. Even if they were my blood relatives, I had no choice but to keep my distance from those who harmed me. After the restraining order was issued, my parents received an official document from the court by mail. They were deeply shocked by the news and immediately told relatives and close friends about it, expressing their dissatisfaction and complaints about my actions. However, for me, there was no change in the fact that this decision was the best choice. I heard from relatives that after the rupture in my relationship with them, my parents' and sister's lives gradually deteriorated. I heard from relatives that after his company went bankrupt, my father struggled to find re-employment and spent his days chasing after debt repayment. With his arrogant personality, his relationships with those around him worsened as his debts piled up, and he lost most of his friends. My mother, while worrying about my father's situation, became mentally exhausted, and the household became increasingly unstable day by day. My sister, desperately raising her twin children, had a strained relationship with her husband and was worn out from child rearing. Financially, things were extremely tough, and she worked tirelessly to cover the costs of the children's education and daily living expenses. My sister often relied on her parents, and now that she no longer had that support, she was in an even more difficult situation. According to what I've heard, my sister also made an effort to get in touch with me, but as I avoided her, her mental tiredness increased and the family tie weakened. My sister and my dad were both dealing with the fallout from their previous deeds. All of them regretted their actions, but they were unable to change the circumstances, and their lives kept becoming worse. Family ties had been progressively weaker, and each of them was alone with an overwhelming sense of remorse and dread, trying to get through those days as best they could. I gave my full attention to my work after cutting off all contact with my sister and parents. I felt like I was growing with each endeavor that was successful, and I gradually got my confidence back. I was able to relax after work by spending some peaceful time at a downtown cafe. Spending time with and making new acquaintances turned into another way for me to get support. I spent my weekends in the villa my grandparents had left. This property, which was in a peaceful mountainous location, was full of fond memories of my grandparents and the affection they had lavished upon me. I was surrounded by my grandparents' affection as I thought back on their smiles and the generosity with which they had loved me. I felt the scars from my past start to mend at that very moment. I would occasionally think back on the past, but each time I became stronger and forgiven myself in my heart. The ties to my former family no longer hold me back. I had made the decision to live my own life and look forward. And then it struck me one day that I really wanted to treasure my own happiness and the future I would create, not my family or my old memories.